Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends! Christmas Survival is back and Snowprint are doing another survival event, with the Red Gobbo again. I'll cover the similarities and differences to the last Red Gobbo survival and give you some tips for success. Survival events are great for gold and experience books, so you have incentive to do well. As usual, a quick shout out to FMG who has been invaluable in putting this together. His referral code is on screen as a thank you. The protagonist for this event is the Red Gobbo, who technically belongs to the Orc faction but is not a playable character outside of survival. I'll talk a bit more about the Red Gobbo later. The event starts on December 25th and runs for a fortnight until January 7th. You start with 2 tokens, and the token refresh rate is 18 hours. Therefore, over the 14 days you will have 20 tokens as a free-to-play player. You will face the Orcs, and you can bring any Xenos as allies. For this survival, the reward character in the chests is different to the protagonist, since the Red Gobbo isn't collectible. The chests contain Calgar shards as well as other Imperial resources, which is a bit odd for a Xenos survival, but it seems that this is the month of Calgar. I'm scrolling through the rewards on screen. As with the previous survival events, there are a string of missions to complete that will give the Red Gobbo a bonus 140% health and damage at full completion. Next, I'm scrolling through the enemies and power-ups for the entire survival. Don't worry if you can't catch it all, there is a summary slide later on. We've seen all of these units before, but for the sake of newer players, I have provided a brief description of each. The main highlight here is the large Squig. They have a 3-hit physical attack, and they are quite tanky for their rarity. Unlike the other orcs, they don't suffer from battle fatigue. You need to be mindful of their bounce mechanic, which can disrupt your summons and character positioning. In case you didn't catch everything as I was scrolling through it, here is a summary slide of all the enemies and power-ups, sorted by level and rarity. I want to point out that for this survival, we do not get ability refresh or resurrection power-ups. That reduces the usefulness of powerful one-time summoners like Aun'Shi or Isaak. There are 2 key waves to defeat in the new survival structure. Defeating the enemies of Wave 11 continues to provide 3 legendary experience books. On screen here are the stats for the enemies on that wave. With the rescaling and restructuring around Mythic, we also get rewards for defeating Wave 13. We get a Mythic book here, and once more the stats of our enemies are pictured on screen. Finally, Wave 18 is the supposedly undefeatable wave, and has 12 unreasonably large Squigs. Each Squig has about 3.5 million health, so we're looking at raid boss levels of resilience. Although defeating the waves can become tedious, Snowprint has made one change for this survival event that might make subsequent runs less onerous. After you have beaten the common waves 3 times, for the rest of the event your characters will start at uncommon rarity. Defeat the uncommon waves 6 times and your characters will start at rare. Defeat the rare waves 9 times and your characters will start at epic. You don't skip ahead to the uncommon or rare stages, but I think the idea is that by letting you start with higher rarity characters, you can progress faster and without paying as much attention. This is the map that we play on for this survival. Just like the last one, this map is pretty forgiving for the player. It's not that big, pretty open, and has a big platform of high ground in the middle, which is generally where your characters will spawn and fight. This time around I have not made the height map because I don't think it's really that necessary. Here, I have overlaid the points where the power-ups tend to appear. As you can see, they cluster on the platform so are reasonably easy to get. You can even bank bombs for higher rarities or healing power-ups if you need to. Beware though, as your own grots might multiply on top of the power-ups. Before we get into the characters you can choose, let's talk a little bit about the protagonist. Most of you will be familiar with the Red Gobbo from last year, but I'll cover him again for the uninitiated. He has 2 hits, physical damage, and a reasonably high damage stat but low armor. The first few times you play, he is a bit squishy and can get overwhelmed by an incoming wave. However, once you have completed all 20 missions, he gets his health and damage increased, and he becomes much more reliable. Even more important than his stats are his abilities. His active, explosive presence does a high amount of blast damage and can be used repeatedly with a cooldown of 10 turns. That cooldown is reduced every time a grot is defeated. This counts both enemy grots and your own, so with the appropriate team and strategy, you can use the active almost every turn, and using it every other turn is quite easy. At lower rarities, this ability is able to one-shot or severely damage most enemies. Only once you start to get into legendary waves, the utility starts to diminish. The passive, called the Revolution, also fuels explosive presence. Anytime a non-Grot unit adjacent to the Red Gobbo is defeated, you summon a Grot in its place that immediately attacks an enemy. Note that works for both your defeated enemies, as well as your characters or summons that happen to die next to the Red Gobbo. Plus, every time a friendly Grot is defeated anywhere on the battlefield, it deals explosive damage to all adjacent Grots and all adjacent enemies. The two abilities have a big impact on your gameplay loops. First, Grots are great for you. When defeated, they can take their attackers with them, but if they are bunched together, the moment one dies, all die with him. Also, you want to try and kill enemies with the Red Gobbo standing next to them, so you can create some extra Grot spawns for yourself. When it comes to the tier list, there is nuance to the recommendations. There are several categories of players when it comes to survival. First, we have the players that just want to be able to get the books. Then we have the players that want to try and clear as many waves as possible, but do not necessarily try out-of-the-box strategies to beat the last wave. Then we have the very, very few that actually make a dent or even clear said last wave. In this tier list, I will mainly cater to the first two groups, trying to get you the books and helping you get far. I'm not going to talk about niche strategies that involve turtling and whittling down the final wave. Here I'm going to rank the characters into tiers, and I will go into detail into why I place some characters where I do. As a reminder, the traits that make a character good in survival are repeatable summons, being able to kill more than one enemy per turn, or being very resilient or having self-healing. Now the tier list and recommendations for this event. Here is the snapshot overview. As you absorb the infographic, I should share one thought I had. Summoners, I think, become much better with the new rarity scaling system in survival. If you're going to start summoning epic drones or ripper swarms from round 1, you can get to a critical mass and sustain that number of summons with more success than in the old system. As a result, summoners in particular might move up the rankings here. In the really good tier, the first character we have is Imospekh. I think he's probably the best character for this event. If you load all the damage and hits power-ups on him, he can clear whole waves on his own. It's worth pointing out that the extra hits from a power-up allow Imospekh to overwatch more than 6 times in a single turn. A completely maxed Imospekh can clear the mythic waves with pretty frightening efficiency. These spots on the map let you overwatch enemies from high ground, helping you get kills before you get the power-ups going. Just keep in mind that this character's damage stat is not that great at higher rarities, so he will struggle to clear enemies if you don't grab those damage power-ups. As a small point, if you use the Call in a Wave early button at the top left of the screen, the enemies will appear during your turn, so Imospekh won't overwatch. Snotflogga is probably just as valuable as Imospekh, due to the interaction he has with the Red Gobbo. Snot kills most things on his own anyway, but the Grots that he summons are better than usual, because they explode and clear swathes of enemies. He's absolutely amazing in this survival. Sho'syl remains excellent, although not quite as good as he is in LRE. Because enemies spawn from all 4 corners, it can be difficult to create an army of drones in survival. Still, he is a powerful ranged summoner and has a solid defensive mechanic with Savior protocols. I've put Gulgortz in the above average tier, but I could see an argument for moving him up. He is reasonably tanky, provides single-use summons, and has the ability to kill 2 enemies per turn, including a ranged attack, which is super solid. He obviously gets better with power-ups, but is a mech, so if you want to carry him to the later stages of the game, you need to be mindful about how you're going to heal/repair him. The Winged Prime is almost in a subcategory of his own, as he makes the other Synapse guys work. You have to aim for the narrow window where your Synapse creature doesn't kill the enemy straight away, but creates a Hormigaunt that does finish them off. Sometimes the enemies are within that sweet spot and things are golden, but sometimes they aren't, and then the Winged Prime doesn't work as well. You can certainly build around him, and his summon, the Tyranid Warrior, is almost an extra character. The Patermine really only works in this rating if you also have the Winged Prime in the team. The Patermine is great when he can summon a lot of Gene Stealers, and his self-heal mechanic can make him survive longer in survival than he otherwise would. When he overkills stuff, he clears enemies with battle fatigue pretty well due to his own passive, and there are lots of orcs with the battle fatigue trait. It's hard to get a really good active out of him where you summon say 3 or 4 Gene Stealers unless you also bring along Xybia or Isaak. I won't go into depth for all of the other characters, but we'll just talk through a couple of them. I've put the Parasite of Mortex in the average tier. His Ripper Swarm summons are okay and can take a lot of punishment. However, Grot tanks and the Orc Boy stick bombs can one-shot them though. If the Parasite doesn't kill the enemy, then he still summons Gaunts if you have the Winged Prime. The Parasite is definitely one of those characters that becomes better when you are starting the battles at epic rarity, as you can fill the battlefield before the enemies can one-shot them. There's also a neat interaction with the Parasite where when you kill an enemy while they are adjacent to the Red Gobbo, you create a Grot and a Ripper Swarm. I've left Aleph-Null in the average tier. She is a mechanical unit that has both some self-healing and the ability to repair other mechanical units. However, her summons, the Scarab Swarms, aren't particularly good when the orcs have tons of blast damage. Rivas is tanky and works reasonably well, but her close combat weakness comes up fairly often. She is not strong enough to kill the tanks, even with her bonus damage to mechanical units, and you only get one Overwatch since there are no ability refreshes. If you manage to get Rivas to Mythic, she obviously becomes much better with her Relic. Xybia and Isaak are both okay summoners, but the main reason I like them both is that when they die, you are allowed to bring a new character to the fight. Then, either Xybia or Isaak comes back via the ambush mechanic, so you effectively can play with 6 characters for a while. I suppose Hollan technically fits the same mold, and I could see a discussion for moving him up a tier. Aun'Shi is down in the bad category because I don't think there is an active that would make it worth bringing him along, but I might be missing something. For me, he always appears in the last wave and murders my team, and at that point nothing survives enough to reuse an active. Okay, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks to FMG once more, as well as my Patreons for their support. Bye for now.